Good morning. I know that every single person in this room is going to leave a legacy. And I know that without knowing how much is in your bank account, or how much you've saved for retirement, or how much you're going to spend in nursing home costs. I know that because I've been an attorney for over 15 years in estate planning and probate, and I get to see the impact of hundreds of lives. I know that you will leave a legacy. Now, my name is Jen Gumbel. Like Jeannie said, I'm an attorney that's worked with hundreds of families. I'm a longtime CLE presenter, meaning that I teach other attorneys how this stuff works. But really, my passion is teaching you guys how this stuff works. Because when you know how it works, you know how to avoid a mess. And so many people don't. They think it's their legal documents, and that's it, and that's great, and I'm good. And then their family is surprised. I don't like those surprises. Now, I'm going to talk about 4 misconceptions today. The first is about legacy itself. Are you chasing what we talk about as legacy, or are you actually making good legacy? We use the word legacy interchangeably as a synonym for wealth. And my people are the culprit of this. The estate planning industry is the culprit. Get a will, plan ahead, so taxes don't eat into the legacy that you leave for your family. Right? That's how we hear about it. But legacy isn't just the numbers in your bank account when you die. Okay? Wealth is a great tool to make good legacy. It also, sometimes, many times, can be a tool for not so great legacy. You also don't need to have wealth to leave a legacy. I think of legacy as the ripples that you're making that will outlast you. I heard a great turn of phrase yesterday. It was something like impact that survives your body. And I loved that. And that can be a lot of different things. See, I know about legacy. I knew about it long before I went to law school. When I was 14, my dad died of cancer. His cancer battle, I hate that phrase. Dumb phrase, I hate it. His cancer battle was 6 weeks. It was an incredibly aggressive cancer. He was diagnosed on Thanksgiving, around Thanksgiving, a couple days before, and died on Super Bowl Sunday. This was in the 90s when the Super Bowl was in January. So it was about 6 weeks. His legacy doesn't have anything to do with his money. One of his legacies is being a Minnesota Vikings fan. Now, I'm not actually from Minnesota. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And my dad became a Vikings fan the very first year, the inaugural season, 1961. The Vikings played a preseason game, not in Minneapolis, not whatever team they were playing, not over where they were. They played it in Sioux Falls at Howard Wood Field. Completely goofy story behind it that I don't really know fully and I'm not going to say here. But they played in Howard Wood Field in Sioux Falls, and my dad was there. And he watched the Vikings play the Dallas Cowboys and lose. But he became a fan, and he stuck with them through how many last Super Bowls? Those of you in Minnesota know. 4 last Super Bowls. And I became a fan. And I watched 4 lost NFC Championship games. My dad wasn't there for the one missed field goal by Gary Anderson. I was there. I was actually in the Metrodome in a section that thought it went through. Heartbreaker. So I'm a Vikings fan. And my kids are Vikings fans now too, and they all do the Skull chant and all of that. That's a legacy, being a Vikings fan. But of course, he had far more important legacies than that. He was a girl dad. Before that was even something we knew how to say. See, my favorite sport growing up wasn't football, it was basketball. I loved basketball. And this was when I was a kid, like it was the late 80s, early 90s, and I would watch during the NBA season, I would watch on Saturday afternoons, I would be glued to the TV watching the game. My favorite team was the Boston Celtics and Larry Bird, because Minnesota didn't have a team again, or yet. Bonus points if I happen to be watching the Celtics, extra bonus points if it was the playoffs, super extra bonus points when they were playing the hated traitor. Los Angeles used to be Minneapolis Lakers. I loved it. And I also wanted to be a professional basketball player, which is crazy because I was a girl. And this was before the WNBA. Girls couldn't play professional basketball. But that's not what was crazy about that dream. If you notice, there's a reason I'm up here and not down there. It's because I'm 5 feet even. I'm tiny. My dad was the runt of his family. My mom was the runt of her family. I joke that we breed for teacup poodles or teacup humans in my family. So it was nuts for me to say I wanted to play basketball. But the honest truth is, the craziest part about it is I have no athletic ability. I can't run. I get a little nervous when I'm handling a basketball. Can't really shoot. And the only thing I have is my elbows. I can throw a well-placed elbow. Now, now my dad supported me. And he was a CPA, tax season. And if there are any CPAs out there, any tax people out there? Tax season, right, yes, they're not here. They can't be here. So the basketball season and the tax season overlap. So my dad couldn't come to every game, but he made the point to come to a few. He would find a way to come to a few. And when he came, he didn't yell at the coach because I wasn't getting a lot of playing time. I was not getting a lot of playing time. He didn't yell at me to play better so I could get more playing time. He just enjoyed coming to watch me do something that I enjoyed. That's a girl dad. And that's a heck of a legacy that has not a thing to do with money. You will leave a legacy. And hopefully, it will be a good one. How are you using your time, your talents, your resources to move the people around you forward? That's legacy. Now, I'm incredibly passionate about the fact that you do not leave a legal mess because it affects your legacy. And I'm not just talking about the money, the cost, minusing the money that your family members get. And time again, I see misconceptions about how estate planning works that are the cause of messes, that if people had only known how it actually worked. When I talk to other attorneys, we always trade war stories, and it's always, oh, this wasn't that way. And oh, for us it's common sense. It's not common sense. And today I want to talk about the 3 main misconceptions. Now, the last time I was here 5 years ago. And I was invited to speak about estate planning, which people who know me here know that I love talking about a lot. And it's hard to shut me up about it. And I was like, I have 45 minutes. I'm going to tell everybody everything they need to know about estate planning. And it was awesome. And people were taking notes, and I got great feedback, but it was overwhelming. Okay? So what I did is I took that talk and I turned it into a workshop, an online workshop. And I expanded it into content over 3 hours, but I chopped it up into something that's digestible, something that you can watch a few minutes of, say, whoa, that's new information. I got to sit with that for a second. Okay, now I want to take some action on that new information. What do I got to do? Okay, let's go take that action. And then come back to the next information. You can find out there's a flyer in your folder. And there's information about your organized afterlife workshop. Yeah, pink sheet, perfect. So there's information about that, as well as a shorter program when you're like, Jen, that's great. I would love to do my estate plan. I am freaked out about the mess that I know I'm going to be cleaning up for someone else. And I have a shorter course for when you're in that mindset that just simply introduces you to the kinds of legal issues that come up. So that you can say, okay, at least I know what this will look like. I don't know if my person's going to do their stuff. I hope they do. Maybe I'll help them do it. But at least I know what the things are. So you can find out information about that. I'm going to clue you in on a little thing. My workshop goes on sale tomorrow. Every April I do a sale. So put that on your to-do list tomorrow. All right. So let's get into the 3 misconceptions. And you'll notice that I talked a lot not about estate planning. These are the 3 things that I want you to, when you leave here today, to say, oh, I know that that's not how it works. Oh, I know that that's not how it works. So that you're equipped, you're better equipped. All right, so also on that flyer on the other side, you'll notice that there is kind of a full page thing with blanks on it. I don't know if you can tell, you might be able to tell I am a squirrel. Like I have the attention span of a squirrel. And if I see a squirrel, it's hard for me to listen to things and to pay attention. And so this is, if you are like that as well, this is for you to be able to say, okay, my brain's kind of drifting. Oh, wait, it's time for me to come back and fill in this blank. And so you come back for the important stuff. Okay? All right, so misconception 1. That a will says what happens to everything you have. This is a huge misconception. People think, oh, if I want something to happen, I say it in my all-encompassing instructions for everything that shall happen when I expire. Yeah, no, that's not how it works at all. Your will has a specific job. Oh, by the way, I skipped this part. That is false. It wouldn't be a misconception if it wasn't false. Very good. Okay. A will says what happens to your stuck assets. It has an important job. It actually does one thing. It talks to the court. It tells the court what to do. Okay? There are only a very few things, there's only a few things that the court needs to be told what to do, or what the court is going to be doing. And so you want to tell them what to do versus them deciding what to do. And that boils down to these 2 things. Number 1, if you have small children, a court will decide who should be their new parent. Okay? So a will can be a way to say, hey, court, here's the person that should be the new parent. The other thing is saying what happens to assets that don't already say where they're going. And this is huge. This is massive. When you die, you're going to have 2 different kinds of assets. In 15 years, I've never run into a situation that didn't have two different kinds of assets. When you die, some assets will tell us where they go. Okay, think of a life insurance policy. When you buy a life insurance policy, the agent that you're working with is saying, okay, well, there's a reason why you want us to write a check when you die. Who do we write the check out to? And you tell them, and they put that in what's called a beneficiary designation. That beneficiary designation tells that company, when you see a death certificate for the owner, you write a check out to this person. Doesn't matter what your will says. They're not waiting to see if an executor is appointed by the court. They don't care. They're waiting for that person to walk in the door. Okay? Other assets work like that too. Retirement accounts will commonly have the same thing, a beneficiary named. When you start that account, your HR person or your financial advisor says, oh, if you die before you use this all, who should it go to? That account is listening to that designation. If you own something jointly, a pay on death designation on a bank account. In my state of Minnesota, we can actually file a deed that says, when I die and not a second before, my house goes to so-and-so. Those assets are moving according to those ownership documents. They're not listening to your will. They don't care. Your will is there for the assets that don't say. I have my car in my own name. It doesn't say where it goes after I die. Actually, Minnesota, you can go to vehicle services and tell them, when I die, I want my car, probably more importantly, my boat. It's probably why we have it. We can pretty much slap a designation on anything in Minnesota. But things that don't are stuck in your name. They're stuck in a dead person's name. And your will says, here's where I want it to go. Okay, now you might be wondering what happens if you don't have a will. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, I don't have a will. What happens then? You might have heard of a little known artist by the name of Prince. Yeah, biggest probate in the state of Minnesota and the biggest probate it will ever have. He died without a will. If you're interested in saying, what happens when you die without a will? Oh, I can tell you. Lots. And what happens when there's a probate? Oh, lots and lots. We got to see it on full display and how things shake out in the state of Minnesota, the things that work well and the things that maybe don't work so well. But a will says what happens to your stuck assets, not the assets that already say where they're going, okay? So here's how this misconception can cause a mess. Let's say that you are very charitably minded, okay? You are single, you don't have kids, you have a sister that you love to pieces, and you have an issue you're extraordinarily passionate about. And you think, you know what, I want some of my assets to go to my sister. Help her, kind of help boost her retirement, that'd be great. But I don't want it all to go to my sister. I want a lot of this to go to an organization that is doing the work that I'm very passionate about. I want to support that, and I want to support that a lot. And this is something we see commonly, that people will have their will, and they'll say half goes to my sister and half goes to the charity because this is my all-encompassing statement of what happens when I expire. And their wealth consists of their home and their IRA. And the IRA, they put their sister on the IRA. And that's it. They're like, well, I did my will, I did my estate plan, things are going to go great. And I said what I wanted to have happen, so that's all going to happen, and it'll be fine. Well, what's going to happen? Let's say that IRA and that home are worth about the same, and let's say the total worth of that is about $1 million. Okay, well, think of the piece of the pie. And the IRA, half of the wealth is going to go to the sister. Half of the house is going to go to the sister. Only half of the house, or the proceeds from the sale of the house are going to go to that charity. You have to think about it as more than just the will, okay? Your will has a specific role, but these other things come into play too. Okay, next misconception, that a will prevents probate. This is the most common one I run into. I sit down with families and they're like, Jen, tell us what's going to happen, but we know we don't have to go to court because looky here, boom, we got a will. And I'm like, okay, that's great. I know what's going to happen. I know where your stuck assets are supposed to go, but I don't know if we need to take this to the court to tell them to do something. What do you mean? This is already saying where it goes. Yes, it says where your stuck asset goes. It doesn't say if the court needs to be involved or not. And here's the thing, estate planning is incredibly different depending on what state you're in. They have tons of different rules. I actually went to school at Drake in Des Moines. I have zero connection to Wisconsin. Sorry, Wisconsin people. I've been hating the Packers, but sorry, not sorry. But these basic ideas are the same in any state, okay? The will is not your get out of probate free card. It tells the court what to do. Whether or not a court has to do something. Oh, by the way, I keep skipping this. Okay, what is this? False. If you are a squirrel or if you're a work ahead person, you've probably already filled this in. A will is for probate. Tells the court what to do. In my state, and this is true in every state, it's just the numbers are different, okay? So probate happens. It can happen for kind of some weird, goofy reasons like, oh no, like they left minor children, this is so sad and tragic, and now those kids need parents. Or, oh, they have a question about the medical care and we like to get someone with authority on behalf of the family to get the medical records. But the vast majority of probates are about assets. And probates happen when it comes to assets. They happen because a certain amount of assets are stuck. Okay, you have your assets that say, here's where they go, here's the beneficiary, boom, flies over to them. Their company's waiting for living people to walk in with a death certificate, awesome. And then some things are stuck. Let's say your checking account, stuck in your name. The bank says, oh, we need letters. Oh, what's that? Can I get a letter from an attorney? No. You need a certificate from the court to say, yes, a probate started, and by the way, here's the executor, okay? Now, in my state, you don't always need something when something's stuck. And again, this is the idea is true in any state, it's just the numbers are different. There's a certain amount of assets where my state of Minnesota, and every state will say, oh, this is not something for us to bother with. This isn't big enough. Okay, in my state, here's the triggers for probate. If what is stuck in your name totals up to over $75,000, then the court cares. If it's under that, your loved ones can fill out a different kind of sheet that doesn't go through the court to say, hey, if there had been a probate, I would have been the personal representative probably. But the state says don't bother the court with it, so I'm just going to collect this, and I promise, swear, Scout's honor, I'm going to do the right thing with these funds. The other trigger for probate in my state is real estate. If real estate is stuck in someone's name, we have to have a probate. A lot of times they turn into what I call stupid probates, the probates I hate doing, because a simple deed, titling it right in the first place, usually it's because I'm working with a widow, and we have to get her appointed as a, we call it personal representative, to sign a deed to herself. I hate that. Okay? It's all about what's stuck, what assets are stuck. Okay? In other states, those numbers and triggers are different. I've heard that the state of New York, I actually have never heard what Iowa or Wisconsin are, sorry. But I've heard the state of New York is as low as $35,000. I don't know how you avoid probate that way. When I'm planning with my clients in Minnesota, we're like, you got that 75, how much, like, think about your car, think about your checking account, we're strategizing getting things to move, but we got some room there. Okay, here's where this misconception that, I have a will, I get out of probate free now, can cause a mess. And it's that real estate title. I hate telling a widow, we need to file with the court, we need to pay a court filing fee, we need to publish for 2 weeks in your local newspaper to let everybody know. They already know, we live in Southeast Minnesota, everyone knows everybody. But we need to publish for 2 weeks that, yes, your husband died. And we need to get you appointed as personal representative so you can sign a deed to yourself. I hate it. And a lot of times the thinking was, I don't have a problem, we did our wills. The wills say that I'm the executor. The wills say it goes to me. Yes, but the state requires you to go through the court to get that to happen. Okay? All right. The last misconception. You might be wondering how a trust fits into all of this. You might be thinking, I know where Jen's going with this. We all need living trust to avoid probate. By the way, because this is like financially minded women, raise your hand if you've heard a celebrity financial advisor say everyone needs a living trust to avoid probate. So, yes, okay. How many of you have you heard from a different celebrity financial advisor? Almost nobody needs a trust. That's overkill for most people. Don't worry about it. Yeah. I can almost always tell what state or what kinds of states they're in because they don't know what they don't know, and they're talking like they're operating a bazooka, and Estate planning is a strategy, particular to you, particular to the kinds of assets you have, particular to the state you live in, okay? Nashville, Tennessee, and Beverly Hills, California. If you can't tell who I'm talking about when it comes to celebrity financial advisors, I'll tell you at the break. Incredibly different places with incredibly different rules. And it also depends a lot on your people, where you want your things to go, who would get your stuff if you didn't say your next of kin. Maybe you love your next of kin. Maybe your next of kin is crazy. You don't want them to get anything. How squirrely are these people? Okay. Your estate plan will look different than your neighbor, than your friend who lives across the country. This is not a one size, one answer approach. Okay? All right, so let's get back to a trust. Last misconception, that a trust says what happens to everything you have. This is your global document of what happens to everything when I expire. That is false. Not always. It can be, but not always. That charitable situation that I was talking about, if you want a certain piece, you want half of the pie to go to your sister and you want half of your pie to go to the charity, a trust can be a pretty good vehicle to do that. A trust is a set of rules. That's all it is. It's not any more complicated than that. It sounds fancy. It's not. It's sometimes a very short legal document, usually not, usually a longer legal document. But all it does is it says, here are the rules of owning something. And here's the person who's going to manage the assets that say they're following these rules. And here are the person, here's the person, or here are the people that will benefit from these assets. Okay, that's like the minimum thing. You got to create this role of a manager, that's called a trustee, and a beneficiary, the people who benefit. And that's why things that are following the rules of the trust are in that first category of things. They aren't stuck, they're saying where they go. Because the asset says, oh, I follow these rules. And the rules say, oh, well, when the first trustee dies, here's who's up next. When these beneficiaries die, here's who's up next. Here's how we figure that out. Awesome. It's why a trust can prevent probate, because it's a vehicle to get things to move automatically. But I hope you noticed what I said there. The assets have to say they're following the rules of the trust. Okay? You sign a trust, that's great. It's not doing anything until a very important piece happens. And in the legal world, we call it kind of a fancy name. We call it trust funding. I don't like that, because regardless of what your plan is, whether that includes a trust or not, you need to get your assets to follow the plan. Whether that means you're listing beneficiaries, whether that means you're making darn sure that your house is not just owned with your spouse, it's owned jointly with rights of survivorship with your spouse. Whatever your plan is, your assets need to follow the plan. And if a trust is part of your plan, you need to get those assets to say, oh, I follow those rules. For example, you own real estate, and depending on the state you're in, you need to have a deed that says, oh, I'm not owned by these homeowners anymore. I'm owned by these homeowners as trustees of their trust. Now, in my state of Minnesota, we can actually do something different, and I like that. We're bad for taxes. We have a lot of taxes. We're really good at having ways to avoid probate, having not difficult probates. We can actually say our house is owned by us as homeowners, but the moment we die, it's going to follow those rules. And it's all about your deeds when it comes to real estate. What do your deeds say? Okay? And then your other assets. Oh, our checking account should have a pay on death designation to the trust. And then the trustee can take over. They can take those funds, pay our funeral bill, split what's left over with all the beneficiaries. Awesome. Okay? But here's how the misconception that, oh, well, if I just sign a trust, that's my all-encompassing statement of what happens. And importantly, based on this idea that, oh, well, I've signed a legal document. This is my get out of probate free card. I signed a trust. I don't need a probate. Well, what if your home isn't titled in the trust? This is something that comes up a lot. An individual or a couple, they set up a trust. They do their estate plan. They go and see a lawyer. They get all of that done. Most people don't. They get all of that done, and they talk to the lawyer, and the lawyer's really smart and is worried about this trust funding, and they pull the deed, and they make a new deed, and they make sure that that house is following the rules of the trust when it needs to. But then, a few years down the road, that couple moves. They downsize. Maybe they go and get a townhome. And they don't think about it. They're like, we did our estate plan 5 years ago. We are set. We're done. Yay. And they don't tell the closing agent that, oh, we need to somehow get this thing to follow the trust. Something on the deed needs to talk about the trust. They don't call their estate planning attorney to say, hey, we're moving, anything we should know, anything we need to do. And so when they die, the house is in their name. It's stuck. It's in a dead person's name. And in my state, the only way it gets unstuck is taking that will to probate that probably says, hey, kick everything over to my trustee. And it's supposed to follow the rules of the trust, which is great. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But if they had understood that this is more like organization than anything else, then they could have taken care of it when they bought the house and had a deed. And then their loved ones don't need to have the probate. You can skip it. See, here's the thing about estate planning. And this is what I've learned after 15 years, practicing in one state of Minnesota, but talking all over the country, having students all over the country, talking to other attorneys across the country, being inactively licensed in a state that's completely different than Minnesota, Florida. Oh my God, they're nuts. And learning in Iowa is that the whole point of estate planning, it isn't to say, yes, I did a will, yes, I have a trust and I'm fancy. It's none of that. It's saying, what legal issues will I leave when I die and when you're incapacitated? And what can I do ahead of time to make that to-do list easier? Because think about it. When are people going to have to deal with their legal to-do list? When they are sad. When the floor has come out from underneath them because you're gone. They're grieving you, hopefully. Hopefully they're not cheering about it. Hopefully they're not Taylor Swift's daughter-in-law, who later gets a shock. When you are stuck, if any of you have ever been around death, if you've had a close loved one, and not just a close loved one that you felt sad about, but like where you had to do stuff, right? You had to clean out their closet. You had to deal with the legal stuff. When you have to deal with the practical stuff, you can't deal with the grief stuff. And when you get through, I don't want to say get through the grief stuff, but as you go through all of the grief, you also see the ways they moved you forward. Maybe some ways that you can move other people forward. That's why this stuff matters. Now, legal documents are incredibly important. I've kind of like been like, oh, I sign a trust and think you're done, and then you're not done. They're incredibly important. They set up your strategy that's particular to you. Think about it as your closet system, right? You look at your closet, it's a mess, and either you or maybe you hire someone, that'd be fun, to come and make a system. To say, this is where your pants should go, this is where your shirts should go, and this is where you're gonna put stuff. And then the next day you start throwing crap in your closet. Okay, your closet's gonna be messy. It doesn't matter how good the system is. You gotta get the things to follow the system. And that's financial organization. Whether you have a trust or not, knowing what you have, and asking the question, when I die, where does it go and how does it get there? What's my beneficiary designation? If I got a life insurance policy out when I was married to that yahoo, who I later divorced, is his name still on there? We see that happen a lot, where the exes are like, well, I guess I could walk in with a death certificate. Knowing what you have and understanding what you own, that is the difference. I work with families who are stuck with avoidable legal issues. I call that a mess. And I see families that don't, where we sit down, we see how things move, and we look at it and we say, there's not a whole heck of a lot to do here. And the difference is understanding what you own and how, and getting those things to follow the plan. All right. Like I said, maybe like you've seen, I'm incredibly passionate about this stuff. And I started a website. This is actually right after. I feel like the last time I talked here was like my spark. I started the website organizedafterlife.com to teach people what they need to know to avoid a mess. And that is consistent throughout any state. On that website, you'll find information about the workshop. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Jen Gumbel. It's been a pleasure talking to you and talking to this group again today. Have a wonderful rest of the day.